This content is brought to you by Fisher Improvement Technologies Online, a learning platform that includes self-paced courses, knowledge sharing, and networking opportunities for safety, quality, and performance improvement professionals. Join now for free at online.improvewithfit.com.
Hi, and welcome to another round of the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast. I'm your host and intentional leader, Rob Fisher, and today we've got a special treat. Richard Bolingbroke is here with us, and Richard has an extensive background in aerospace and production, and I just thought it'd be a good idea for us to have a bit of a conversation on a little bit about how the Essential Leadership Cycle helped them out, and a little bit about just kind of a wandering conversation about the elements of the Essential Leadership Cycle and the practical application. Richard, you just want to introduce yourself to the folks, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Rob. So, as you mentioned, my name is Richard Bolingbroke. I've spent the last 36 years in the aerospace and metals industry, more latterly in the titanium side of that, and in my time there working on quality and quality assurance.
So, we met through, you were working at one of the client locations or for a client, and we met through some gathering of a bunch of senior leaders. Correct. And we kind of introduced the human performance, human factors concepts. As I recall, in Vegas was the first time we met, right?
That's correct, yep.
And so I'm glad that we remember that. So this is one of those cases where what happened in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas, because here we are talking about it. But that was kind of sprung on you guys as here's this human factors thing. We're going to learn about it, and then we see what we're going to do with it. Was that kind of the way that all started?
That's correct. I mean, it's become into the aerospace business more latterly through new standards come out. And we were introduced to you through a colleague who had previously worked with you. So
on
it's
the safety side, right?
On the safety side, yeah. That's correct, with a previous employer. And so we kind of asked you to come in to tell us what it was all about and to give us an idea of what our human factors program could look like. And that day transformed not just myself, but I think gave the whole of the senior leadership group there a different perspective on how to manage people and how to achieve some of the targets that they want to get out of the company.
As I recall, they started seeing some things that they were able to draw some lines of separation in or draw some clarity on that they hadn't put together, and on both the safety side, the environmental side, the quality side. And those conversations were pretty rich that day, as I recall.
There was a lot of energy in that room from the very senior people in the company. And, when I came out of that, I got virtually all the general managers asking me they want to be first on the road. Yeah. In the end, we picked out 5 facilities to trial it in. And we did that over the last 12 months or so, I guess.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me about putting it in the Essential Leadership Cycle is I kind of look at those senior leader initial engagements as a self and team awareness exercise.
Yeah, absolutely.
That people don't realize that when it's happening, they don't get introduced to the Essential Leadership Cycle till late in that day. But all along, the self and team awareness piece, people start to figure out, here's what I knew and what I didn't know, and here's where those gaps can help me.
And that wasn't, the way you came across wasn't to teach us that. That was just came out naturally in that discussion, that people suddenly realized, this is something we're missing in our management philosophy.
And there was no, like you said, there was no implicit, here is, today we will create self and team awareness for
Correct.
You so that we can move to shared vision and values. It was the amalgam of the conversation just kind of led there. It's how we've designed that senior leader workshop.
Yeah. No, worked beautifully.
Good. So what is it, what were some of the things that maybe you walked away with that were either explanations of things that you already thought to be true or were enhancements to the way you thought? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from all of this is recognizing that difference between errors and violations. And too often, especially in the company I worked in or companies I worked in, there was an immediate jumping to, who's responsible, where do we go? And you taught us that that's 1% of the cases. 99% of the time, somebody's made a mistake or the system's let them down to allow them to make that mistake. And that's the bit that we really got to transform ourselves into, to try and put our management system in place to try to work to prevent those from occurring in the first place.
Or mitigate their consequences.
Or mitigate them, yeah. Mitigate is easier to do.
That whole conversation we had, we just had a recent conversation on in manufacturing. You can start with a failure modes and effects analysis.
Yeah.
And then you can go a lot of different places from there. But if you don't understand how humans succeed and fail, that doesn't play its way into your failure modes and effects.
Yep. And we talked about preventive mechanisms really, and the learning you can get from that, which then goes back into your FMEAs to try to prevent the issue from happening in the first place.
And we really, organizationally, while we want to get to that learning and continuous improvement piece, we still have to go through the driving elements, self and team awareness, shared vision and values, and clear roles and processes. And that will then start to generate trust that will allow us to learn later.
Yep.
So we had a good conversation about developing trust instead of demanding it as well.
Yeah, demanding trust, that doesn't work. And it's easy to say we'll build trust up, but unless the management team can start to get to the stage where people trust them through their own actions, I don't think you'll ever get there. And that's a big step and a big learning point, I think, for management teams.
And I think with your leaders and with leaders in general that I go talk to, that gear model about how you have to turn the leader knowledge into different language and behaviors, and then the people will know what you want them to do by the way you engage, not by what you tell them, but the way you engage with folks.
Yep,
and I think you guys did a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, and you talk about the tightness of that band. Yeah, that's really the way that you engage with the workforce, and that's a big learning aspect as well. I think people have got to learn how to engage properly with the workforce. Goes back to that demanding of trust. You can't just go out there and do that. You've got to find a way to engage on the terms that they accept, and will come along with you then.
And you've been doing this a long time, like you said, over 30 years. What may have been what's missing about how people can engage to get good outcomes instead of what we've been doing not very well for 20, 30, 40 years?
I think that goes back into kind of Western culture or anything else, isn't it? That hierarchical culture we have that is difficult to change your attitude overnight to engage in people in a different way. But that's something I've learned over the last 12 months is that really important aspect, to be able to talk to people in their own language, in a non-threatening sense, in a way that people think that you're there to help them, to make their life easier, not to make my life easier. And that's a really important aspect.
Well, and I look back and I think about we're from quality, we're here to help you, or we're from safety, we're here to help you. That's not an engagement. But trying to learn from people's normal work requires a different set of questions. And that different set of questions means that the leader knowledge, language, and behaviors are different, so people get different answers. I mean, that was pretty evident pretty quickly.
Yeah, and in my world, the last thing I want to do is get people to hide things under the carpet. I want them to tell me there's an issue, because if you get a quality issue that goes out into the aerospace business, that can be catastrophic. So I've always been trying to encourage people to come forward, no risk in coming forward, to be able to tell us what's happened, not what's gone wrong or who's responsible, what's happened, so we protect the product and protect the customer.
And part of that protection of the product and the customer, we were talking about a new standard that's out, a human factors standard, and how this all maps pretty well to the hows for enabling that standard to be met.
Yeah, the new standard is the AS 13100 standard in the aerospace industry, which is an extension of the quality system, general quality system. And for the first time, it's brought in human factor elements into that as a mandatory element. And as we were talking, there are kind of many aspects of that we've got to look at, part of which your teaching has helped us with. But there are other aspects there we've got to work on as well. Open reporting, management responsibility, investigations, all those things to try to eliminate or reduce the consequences of error.
And like many standards, it tells you what you're supposed to accomplish, but the devil's in the details on the, okay, how do I get there?
How
I
do you
think
do
that's where you take something like the essential leadership cycle and say, okay, as leaders, how are we going to make sure that we hit all of those things, that we create commitment, or that we have diversity and inclusion, that we generate trust, and where do we put accountability?
And you have to have that to sustain it. There's no way you can do it without having those essential elements to give you the basis which you can go forward and live with it, live with those values.
And it's nice to be able to tie them. One of the things that I've kind of been proud of on the essential leadership cycle, it's nice to be able to tie those elements to the potential outcomes. And if you find yourself, you're working on those resultant conditions, and you're spending all your time working on the resulting, we're going to manage accountability, we're going to go get commitment, we're going to learn, as opposed to creating those by using the driving elements, then that's been a big change for the way leaders interact with each other and with the workforce.
Yeah, and the 4Ds book you just showed me, I was reading the introduction to that, and he was talking about how to study things that go right rather than things that go wrong.
Yeah.
And we spend too much time historically assuming things go right and then study the things that go wrong. I don't think you learn as much doing that than if we could turn that dynamic around.
Or at least have some kind of percentage that we're going to shoot for. Again, that self and team awareness piece. I think very often that leaders don't know why things went right, that our workers have protected the systems, they've protected each other, they've protected the quality through their adaptation of normal work. But we're not learning from any of that, because if they talk about variance from normal work variance, then we treat it like they're violating a rule, and we punish, even though what we're trying to do is learn from normal work.
I think that's part of the way that, again, management has been brought up, is you manage the exceptions, you don't manage the norm.
Yeah.
Okay, you've been taught to get in there and sort things out and make it work. You do that by studying what went wrong rather than what goes right.
Is that maybe a human nature characteristic instead of a characteristic of a bad organization? In other words, we've got an organization full of people that I think about raising kids. I don't know that we spend a lot of time talking about what they do right, or talking about the value they add to our family or our block or whatever. But if they do something wrong, we're all on that.
Yeah, and you have no training with kids, do you? You throw in the deep end without any training. You learn on the job, and it's easy, I think, to manage by exception and by telling them what went wrong rather than helping them understand what goes right all the time.
And I've never thought about it this way, but very often the first word a kid learns is no.
Yeah.
Not mom or dad or yes or
yeah.
And so that kind of sets that again.
That tone.
If we think about things, talking about self and team awareness, shared vision and values, if we think about things that are human nature characteristics, then we can manage those if we're aware of. And that piece of advanced error reduction, of being aware of and managing our tendencies. I think that a lot of the self and team awareness in the initial senior leader workshops was, I had no clue that, maybe no clue it was out there, certainly no clue of my impact on it and my ability to influence these things.
No, I don't think there was any awareness there apart from the guy who'd been through it already and knew something about it, but the rest of us were quite new to the whole concept. And
it was funny talking to the guy, Mark. It was funny, he says, I've been trying to push this rope.
Yep.
People won't listen to me. Well, if you try and do it in 2-minute snippets, and nobody can put everything together, instead of taking them on a journey that self and team awareness is a journey. It's not an instantaneous moment in time, I don't think.
Yeah, but it was to some extent that light switch went on in many people's heads that day, and that really started our journey down that path.
Yeah. What are some other areas that you think, because we've put this new standard into play, the essential leadership cycle may be a valuable enabler for a lot of the way the management systems help enable the requirements of that new standard?
I don't think it is necessary, just relative to qualities and relative to the whole way you manage your business. Those concepts are sound managerial practices, I think.
And we've been talking for quite a while now about operational excellence, and quality is a subset of operational excellence. Safety is a subset of operational excellence. Environmental, diversity, all those are subsets of being operationally excellent. So I think you're spot on that when you don't have to change the way you're approaching things, create different systems for those.
We were talking the importance of getting it integrated into your existing systems.
Yeah.
And just use those processes you've already got, but be aware of those factors you're trying to teach us, and to broaden our view and change our style slightly.
So if we think about the end game on bad things, people talk about investigation. We really don't want people investigating. We want them analyzing the conditions that were created. So just there's some changes in terminology along the way that if people aren't self and team aware, they don't understand that if we value people, we don't want to investigate them, right?
Yeah.
we want to have them help us understand what went wrong and how it went wrong, and how we let the system fail the human as opposed to just the human failing the system.
Yeah, and to that further, we were talking about the importance of getting out there and observing things going right, and asking the right questions with people to understand what they're finding difficult in what they're doing. What is it in their procedure that doesn't work?
Yeah.
They have to work around every time. And I think that's really where the benefit really comes. If you try to move towards more the preventive side rather than having to investigate issues that go wrong or near misses, you're out there observing things go right, so you can put the things in place to stop that from happening in the first place.
And if you get people talking about things, they will talk about things.
If they're comfortable,
Right.
if they don't feel as though they're being interrogated or there's any bad side to talking about things. So if they see you there, it said, as somebody going to enable them to get something out of it themselves, for them and their team, that they open up and they talk to you.
And those are management processes.
Yep.
Because you have different people with different personalities that would approach those engagements very differently left to their own devices. But if we give them things like, what kind of questions should we ask?
Yep.
How do we make the wrong thing hard to do and the right thing easy to do? And then we have to listen and then take that back and do something with it as a leadership team.
You have to do something with it, because they'll tell you once, and if you don't come back out with something which they see some positive outcome from, they won't tell you again.
Right.
Yeah, that's part of the build-up of trust with people.
Don't waste my time.
Don't waste my time. Yeah, I told you once.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Anything else you want to add about the essential leadership cycle and maybe some of the ways that you've used it or seen it used?
Early days for us, I think, before my previous employment. It's a long burn, and I think the important thing is to have a process that's sustainable, and that you can't do that overnight. That's a change in attitude in people's minds, and have a commitment to from the whole team to sustain the change, and that's the important bit. Get on the road, get going, with basic principles, but make sure you stay on the road.
Yeah, and use the tools that help keep you on the road.
Well, they're an essential part of it. Yeah,
right.
you have to.
We've now moved from. I remember in the old days, shouldn't say old days, a long time ago, in one of the states, they would put these little curbs on the side of the 2-lane roads because they wanted the accidents to happen in the road They didn't want cars to go off
really?
the road.
Okay.
But what they were doing was sending cars into each other, that unintended consequences piece. But now we've got so many mechanisms, so many tools in place that can tell you when you're drifting from line to line. I think that's the way human organizational performance, human factors, I think that's where we're at now, is that we've created really good systems for going down the road.
Yeah.
And if you use those systems, you got a better chance of making it
Staying on the road.
successfully, and it being sustainable, as opposed to just saying, well, we're going to create this new path. We're going to take this road over here. We're going to build this other road over here.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
well, good. Well, Richard, thank you very much. I appreciate you sitting down with me for a little while today, and I hope you enjoy listening to this. Please like it and share it, and remember, intentional leadership starts with you.